All right. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Dr. Kyrillos. I'm just to figure out where I am here. I think you're seeing my screen. You're seeing one of my there it is. Okay. So I'm Dr. Kyrillos. I am an obesity medicine specialist, and I practice here at Jefferson in Philadelphia. And I'm really excited to be here tonight. And I'll get right in, try to answer as many questions as I can. But there's so much information. I'm going to give you a lot of resources at the end so you can find more things on your own. So I'm going to start off with a disclaimer. Keto is not yet the standard of care. There are a lot of medical providers that are not yet on board, and that includes dietitians and other healthcare professionals and personal trainers. A lot of people are going to have a lot of different ideas. It's not yet in line with the U.S. dietary guidelines. So definitely check in with your physician or other caregiver before you do this on your own. Although you might have to explain what you're doing and give more information, because if they're not aware of it, they might be a little negative at first. And sorry, I'm just getting used to the controls here. Okay. I do know I have a few patients out there that are also alum, but just for all of you, I'm not speaking as your personal physician, so none of this is direct medical advice. And I would say only try this diet if you want to improve your health, despite it contradicting almost everything we've told you about what to eat in the past. I like to tell my patients that nutrition is kind of like religion and politics. Everybody has their set mantra and dogma and can back it up with science. And this is very similar to that. So to take, you decide on your own. You know what's been working for you and what hasn't been, and this is something different. So the objectives, I'm going to talk about what is a ketogenic diet, why does it work, a little bit about the glucose and insulin metabolism, and other problems that are related to glucose and insulin. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to do it, and maybe and we'll talk about some concerns about evidence and safety, and then where to get some more information. So what is ketogenic diet? So keto, it's a dietary lifestyle. We don't like to use the word diet because every diet, no matter what diet it is, if you go off of it, you're going to gain your weight back or go back to your original health condition. So we look at it as more of a lifestyle, finding a balance, on how to do this going forward. It's a very low carbohydrate intake, and by doing that, your body learns to use fat for fuel. And part of the process in using that fat is making ketones. And some people, if they go low enough with their carbohydrate intake, burn that fat and make ketones in their blood, and they go into a state of nutritional ketosis. Other names for this are keto, low carb, high fat, LCHF or HFLC, low carb lifestyle, Atkins, Banting. I know in a lot of other countries, and Australia, New Zealand, they call this Banting based on Robert Banting, who was one of the first people that promoted this. And I want to emphasize this here, and I will continue to emphasize it, that this does not have to be all or nothing. I tell a lot of my patients, I don't want you to go home and say, oh, I tried keto, it was too hard, so I quit. Take some of the principles, start making some shifts, but you don't have to be in ketosis for this to have a benefit. This is a little bit odd, speaking into my computer and not having feedback, but so I want to ask everybody, do you know what ketones are? But I'm going to assume that, do you know what carbohydrates are? I'm going to assume that most people do know, but in case you don't, these are carbohydrates. Bread, rice, pasta, juice, soda, chips, sweets, candy, anything that's sugar or starch. Starch is just long chains of sugar. And so we'll stop for a second and ask you, if you have a normal blood sugar and you could take all the sugar out of your bloodstream and put it into a container, think about how much sugar that would be. Anybody have a guess of how much sugar that would it be? A bowl, a cup? And I'll tell you the answer is a teaspoon. So right now, if you have a normal blood sugar, there's about a teaspoon of sugar dissolved in your bloodstream that's equivalent to a sugar cube or a sugar packet. So let's say you have some orange juice that has 12 teaspoons of sugar in a 15-ounce bottle. So here's what happens. You drink it or eat it, your carbs, your blood sugar jumps up. And then right away, your body releases insulin. And insulin takes that sugar. By the way, all the carbs you eat, whether they're sugary or starchy, your body turns them into glucose. So that bread, rice, pasta, or the juice, soda, sweets, they all turn to glucose. So you eat them, your carbs, your blood sugar goes up, and then right away the insulin comes in. Insulin's job is to process those carbs and turn them into energy. But if you don't need the energy, then it stores the energy as fat. And then your blood sugar drops because the insulin usually takes out too much sugar because it's expecting a sour berry, not a big donut. So it overshoots and takes too much sugar out, and then your blood sugar drops. And what happens? You get hungry, craving, tired, moody, dizzy, headachy, shaky, that sugar drop. So what do? To feel better, you eat again. And you end up in this cycle where you're never quite satisfied, and yet all of what you're eating, or a lot of what you're eating, is getting diverted to fat, and your body isn't seeing what it needs. Now, protein, that's another type of nutrient. When you eat protein, your body needs protein for muscles and joints and bones. But if you eat too much protein, the excess protein, it can't be stored as protein, so your body converts it to glucose. And then you go into the same cycle. The glucose gets stored as fat. Now, the good news is fat. When you eat fat, your body is more likely to use it than to store it. Fat does not need insulin. So you can use it without storing it. You feel more satisfied. You don't have the ups and downs of your energy driving your appetite. So that's the basis behind the keto diet, is trying to keep your insulin low and use more fat. And let me tell you more about insulin. Think about insulin as the fat storage hormone. Now, it's obviously has a lot more uses than that, but when you have excess insulin, it causes a lot of problems in your body. The one thing it does is it crams that sugar into your fat stores, but it also has a lot of detriment to other organs in your body. So too much insulin can push too much sugar into your liver, and the high insulin also is a growth factor and causes inflammation, so it causes fatty liver. You can get diabetes. It can cause high blood glucose, lipid levels. It can have problems in your brain with Alzheimer's disease. They're calling Alzheimer's now the new diabetes type 3. I'm gonna have to close this question thing because I can't see so polycystic ovary syndrome is caused by insulin resistance. Retinopathy can be caused by too much sugar and insulin resistance even before diabetes develops. Erectile dysfunction is associated with this, problems with the immune system, problems with your blood vessels, kidney disease, certain cancers. There's some interesting research now looking at treating cancers with ketogenic diet, or people tolerating chemotherapy and cancer cures better when they're following a ketogenic diet or even intermittent fasting. So we're finding that a lot of problems with the current modern day diseases are a result of insulin resistance and too much insulin in our body, overusing glucose causing too much insulin. So the goal is to keep your insulin low. the less insulin you have, the less insulin you need, the more that will reverse that insulin resistance and reverse the problems associated with the high insulin. So how do we do that? Eat more fat, and then moderate protein and low carbohydrates. And the other way to do it is to let more time go between eating so that your insulin level can calm down and you can burn more fat. So maybe eat 2 or 3 meals a day and try not to snack. And everybody says at this point, wait a minute, this is exactly the opposite of what everybody else has told me. They say, don't eat fat, eat 6 small meals. Well, what happened was, back in the 70s, they took the fat away from us. They said, don't eat fat, it causes people to be fat, it causes heart disease. And then we were too hungry to make it to the next meal. So they said, okay, why don't you have snack? That way you won't be so hungry by the next meal that you eat everything in sight. But, you know, the older ones among us, and you know, I remember when I was a kid, we didn't have snacks. You had 3 square meals and that was it. So what to eat? Now, I took a lot of this information from a website called Diet Doctor, and I give this to any of my patients on board here will probably recognize a lot of this lecture, but I'm going to refer back to this website, Diet Doctor, quite a few times because it's very helpful. So what to eat? Real food: meat, fish, eggs, cheese, butter, and vegetables that grow above the ground. So the rule of thumb, vegetables that grow above the ground, except for corn and peas. They are the low carb vegetables, or non-starchy vegetables. What to avoid? Bread, rice, pasta, juice, soda. And this is about the time where people say, wait a minute, fruit? What about, I have a banana a day to keep my potassium up. Fruit has a lot of sugar, and we'll get to that a little bit later. So how much carbs should you eat? Well, first of all, let me show you how many carbs. I'll give you an example of how many carbs 20 grams looks like. So a half a bagel is 20 grams of carbs, a finger full of pasta or rice, a tiny potato. These are all 20 grams of carbs, of refined processed carbs. These each are 20 grams of real food, natural carbs. So these are nuts, these are berries. And here's the slide about fruit. What about fruit? In his website, the Diet Doctor website, he arranges everything low to high and green, yellow, and red. So eat more of this, moderate, you know, be careful with this, and much less of this. Grapes and bananas, which are a lot of people's favorites, have the most sugar. Why does fruit have so much sugar? You say, well, sugar's natural. You told me to eat natural food, real food. Well, sugar does not look like, fruit does not look like what it used to look like. This is what bananas used to look like. They were short and stubby and had a lot of fiber and seeds. Carrots, although carrots aren't fruit, they've still been selectively bred to be like big and juicy and lovely. Look at watermelon. I mean, those of you, you know, I think every adult can probably remember when watermelon did not look like this, without seeds and you know, perfectly bright, colorful, all sugar. So fruit has changed over the years, and there's more information on sciencealert.com. If you just Google prehistoric fruit, you'll get this information. It's very helpful. So how many grams of carbs should you eat? The average American has 200 to 300, actually more like 300 to 400 grams of carbs a day. The U.S. dietary guidelines actually recommend 325 grams of carbs as part of a 2,000 calorie diet. So if you're eating what the U.S. dietary guidelines tell you to eat, for a grown man, that's 2,000 calories and 325 grams. That's not a very low carb diet. Low carb is considered under 100, and keto is under 20. So with keto, you're bringing your carbs so low that you're training your body to burn fat mostly as fuel, and that makes ketones. So how should you decide what to do? Well, a strict ketogenic diet, those who stay under 20 grams, again, that's what happens. Your body adapts to burn mostly fat instead of glucose. That fat breaks down to ketones to use as fuel. Nutritional ketosis is healthy and probably how we were designed to live. And I'll give you some links to some data and research a little bit later on. And Nutritional ketosis is not the same thing as ketoacidosis. Ketoacidosis is mostly people with type 1 diabetes who don't make their own insulin. They have a risk of that. I'll mention down here, there's also a risk of ketoacidosis in people taking a new diabetes medication in this class called the SGLT2 inhibitors. That's Farxiga and Vocana and Jardiance. They have a higher, if they follow a ketogenic diet, they have a higher risk of what they call euglycemic ketoacidosis. But to the average person, ketosis, nutritional ketosis, is very safe. But again, I'm not speaking as your doctor. You need to talk to your own provider about that. So who should do strict keto and who should do moderate keto? I want to reiterate, beware of all or nothing thinking. You don't have to do this 100%. I don't want you to set yourself up for failure. If you can't stick to the strict low keto, low carb, then do a more moderate keto. Maybe shoot for 50 grams of carbs. I find people that shoot for 100 grams a day, that's a little too much wiggle room, and it causes more sugar and carb cravings. So I recommend people start at around 50 grams per day. But again, it's important to find a balance that you can follow long term. And think about yourself. Are you someone that likes to go into things gradually, or do you like to jump in cold turkey and do all or nothing? How does this fit into your lifestyle? Do you work night shift and there's no food around? Do you travel a lot? Maybe you want to do this, certain times of the year and then cycle out of it. I do tell people that there are certain people that might benefit more from doing a strict keto. Uncontrolled diabetes, people with autoimmune disease, mental health issues, migraine headaches, need for more rapid weight loss. I have patients that need to have, they need to lose weight to have a knee replacement or to have a hernia repaired or some other surgery. So they need to lose weight more quickly. Other chronic diseases, we're seeing more and more anecdotal evidence and research behind this helping other diseases. I have one patient who had Crohn's disease with bleeding diarrhea and on medications, and it was completely cured by switching to a keto diet. She's off medications, her bowels are perfectly fine. So there are some people who I'll recommend, hey, why don't you give this a more hardcore try to see how it affects some of your chronic diseases. So those are some ways to decide for yourself how hardcore you want to be about this. If you want to do the hardcore keto, so I'll give you the ultimate so that the end game, and then you can decide where you want to go from here. In general, we look at some people ask me about the macronutrient ratios. How much of each should I eat? Carbohydrates, 5 to 10% of your diet, or about 20 to 30 grams per day. Protein is about 15 to 30% of your diet, and then fat is 65 to 75%. Now the fat is, this is by calorie, so fat has a little more than 2 times as many calories as protein. So 10 grams of fat is not the same as 10 grams of protein. This is by calorie. It looks like 80 to 100 grams of fat, of protein, and maybe 150 grams of fat in the life. But there are apps that can help you figure this out. If you look up keto apps, I don't want to endorse any specific ones, but there are many that are helpful. They'll help you figure this out. There are websites that'll help you figure this out. A lot of people ask me, what's the difference between total versus net carbs? And I can't right now see the question. So hold on, let me just take a quick look.
There haven't been any yet, so.
Okay, thanks.
You're good. You're welcome.
Okay, because that's often a quick question. So people will read about total versus net carbs. The total, when you look at the label, you read carbohydrates, and that gives you the total number. And then under it, you'll see dietary fiber, sugar, and sometimes sugar alcohols. Sugar alcohols are like erythritol and sorbitol, things like that. Some people think that you don't absorb the fiber or the sugar alcohol, and you can subtract those out. So if something has 9 grams of carb, you can subtract the fiber and you can subtract the sugar alcohol, and now the net carb is 4 grams. So the total carb is 9 grams, the net carb is 4 grams. Hardcore keto followers follow total carbs. The thinking is that not everybody absorbs the same amount of fiber. There have been studies showing, like with almonds, for example, when people eat almonds, some people absorb more of the almond content than others. So you can't predict how much of that fiber you're going to absorb. So the safest thing is to go by net carbs, but I often recommend, the safest thing is to go by total carbs. But with my, trying to get everybody on board and not the all or nothing thinking, if you can do this with net carbs to start, that might be an easier way to go. Looking at 20 grams of net carbs is about 20 or 30 of net carbs is about 50 grams of total carbs. But I'm getting into nitty gritty here. How much fat you should eat. So fat, some people go a little bit crazy with fat bombs and bulletproof coffee, and there's a lot of trends online. You don't need to meet a certain number. All these numbers, you don't have to eat 20 or 30 grams of carbs. So at the end of the day, and you've only eaten 15, you don't have to say, oh, well, I have to eat another 15. Same thing with fat. If your app says, oh, wait, I can eat another 50 grams of fat, I'm going to go have a fat bomb. Don't have it unless you're hungry. The goal with fat is to be satisfied. If you feel satisfied, if you don't feel hungry, then you've had enough. But if you're craving, you're hungry, then maybe you need to have some more fat. And your body will become easier as you go along. You'll be able to listen to your body more. People that are not doing keto and are having carbs, whether they're processed or whole grain, these kind of things, they hijack your brain, and we can't regulate them. Your brain can't really regulate the carbs that you eat. So you end up being hungry all the time, and you don't know when to stop. And think about, you have a big dinner, you have steak and, potatoes and not the potatoes are good, but, steak and vegetables, and you're full, you can't eat another thing. And then somebody comes out with a dessert. Suddenly you can eat that. There's room in there. Carbs are like a different entity. But when you take those out, you'll become much more aware of hunger and fullness, and you'll be able to stop when you're full. So some people say, listen to my body. My body tells me I'm hungry all the time. Your body will start talking differently. So here's a simple starter guide that I give to my patients. This is my handout. Pick a protein, pick a veggie or two, and add a fat. And the protein can have, you can have the fatty cuts, you can have the dark meat, you can have the skin, eggs, cheese, bacon. These are in alphabetical order, not, even though bacon's on top, it's not in order of, importance. Vegetables, anything that grows above the ground except for corn and peas. So these are some examples, anything leafy, green. I don't think there's anything green that grows below the ground. Onions maybe. But these are just some examples. If you're doing hardcore keto, you even want to be careful of these. Having 2 or 3 cups a day total of veggies, which means like 2 or 3 handfuls. And then have a fat source. So if your protein, it doesn't have much fat on it, make sure you add some extra fat. So have some avocado, cheese, butter, olive oil. MCT oil is becoming popular, medium chain triglycerides, and that's keto 200. We'll save that for later. But basically, so what this looks like is maybe, coffee with cream, heavy cream, nothing light, low fat, fat-free. Skim milk doesn't have fat, but it has lactose, which is milk sugar, which is carbs. So stick to the cream. I think it's okay to have the non-nutritive sweeteners like stevia, Splenda, NutraSweet. Those are controversial also. My theory is we know sugar is killing us. We don't know yet if these are killing us. Stay tuned. But right now the research, there's no compelling evidence in either direction that these are harmful or helpful. So if you need to have something a little bit sweet, then these are okay. Bacon and eggs, leftovers, something called oatmeal, which is like flax seeds, chia seeds with cream, and you can put cinnamon. or don't have breakfast. It's okay to skip a meal if you're not hungry. Lunch, salad with a meat and a full fat dressing. Again, nothing light, low fat, fat free. They took the fat out, they added sugar. Maybe another fat source like avocado or cheese. Try not to snack, but if you really have to have a snack, cheese, pepperoni, popcorn, maybe a handful of nuts. And then dinner, meat, veggies with butter, salad with a full fat dressing. If you really have a sweet craving, maybe some berries with whipped cream. To me, they replace chocolate. Believe it or not, that cream really has the same consistency and sometimes, and I'm able a lot of times to go without chocolate. So again, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're no longer hungry. You don't have to wait till you're absolutely full and bursting at the seams. Learn to listen to your body. That'll become easier, as I said. You don't have to eat everything because it's there, but don't go hungry. I don't want you to be hungry. If you're hungry and craving, ask yourself, am I really hungry? Ask yourself a couple times. Am I hungry? Do I really feel hungry? And if you really are, then eat something. You don't have to count calories. Again, listen to your body, and it's okay to skip a meal. And another mention about calories, the low calorie, low fat diets, you lose weight initially, like the Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and following MyFitnessPal, you lose weight, but then your body goes into starvation mode and your metabolism slows down and you get hungry and you gain the weight back. And then you think, oh my God, I'm a failure. I have no willpower. It's not your fault. This is biology. That's how our bodies were designed. Our bodies want to hold on to fat. It wants to be ready for the long winter and hibernation. So we're used to, packing on a little more fat. But it doesn't happen as much if you actually eat fat. Then your body's saying, oh, wait, okay, I'm getting some fat. I don't need to hold on to it so much. I can use this. I kind of look at it as like holding your breath. I can hold my breath for maybe a minute, and lower my oxygen level. But after that, I don't have any control over it. And then my body takes over and I don't say, oh my God, what a failure I am. I can't hold my breath for 10 minutes. No, that's biology. That's how it works. So some other questions about the keto diet. Do I need to check my ketone levels? If you're doing hardcore keto, you might want to try it, especially if you're trying, to count carbs or stick to the food lists and if you're not sure if this is working or not. There are 3 ways to do it. I usually, and let me step back and say, I usually don't recommend counting ketones because I think for some people it can be, it can be motivating, but for other people they say, oh, I can't get into ketosis, I quit. And again, it's not all or nothing. But some people that are really doing this, for health reasons and want to be hardcore, it can be helpful. The urine strips are the most popular way, and they're not very accurate. They're cheap. You can get them on Amazon. When I dip my urine, it does not show ketones, but because if I drank too much water, then it's diluted and they don't show up. Or if you've been in ketosis for a long time, you don't spill as many ketones into your blood, into your urine, and so they don't show up. So with ketones urine strips, if they're positive, then you can be pretty sure that you are in ketosis. But if they're negative, you don't know. All bets are off. The blood monitor has been considered to be the most accurate. There are a couple blood monitors that are now available by retail. You can order them from Amazon or there's a few private websites. You stick your finger. You want your level to be between 0.5 and 3 millimole. 0.5 is just at the lower edge. Some people really want you to be between 1 and 3. But you have to prick your finger, and the strips can be very expensive. I think they run about $1 a piece. And insurance does not cover this at this point. And the breath monitor, they're becoming more reliable, and they're reusable. You just keep blowing into it, and a lot of them will hook up via Bluetooth or a connector to an app or your computer, and then it'll just download the result. So you don't need to replace strips. You don't need to keep rebuying the strips. You don't have to stick your finger. So in the long run, they haven't been as popular yet because they weren't as reliable, but now they're becoming more popular. So you might want to do a little research and see what works best for you, the blood or the breath monitor, if you want to do this hardcore and follow them. Side effects. So if you haven't done this, and especially if you're eating a lot of carbs or drinking a lot of carbs, and you dive into this full force, you can get something popularly called the keto flu. It is, you get dizzy, nauseated, foggy, achy, tired, and I have patients come back and said, oh, I tried keto, I felt horrible, I'm never doing it again. Well, it only lasts for a couple days to a week or so, and it's from a withdrawal from the carbs. So the carbs and the high insulin hold on to a lot of sodium and a lot of fluid. So when you cut those carbs and your insulin level drops, you have a rapid loss of fluid and sodium, and then along with that sodium comes potassium and magnesium. So the cure for it is to stay hydrated, eat more salt, and maybe have some broth or bouillon. Some plans actually build broth and bouillon, into the starter program. So you may have noticed I contradict a lot of things. You don't have to have 3 meals a day. You shouldn't have snacks, or you don't have to have snacks. You can have salt. Most people, be careful if you have heart failure or really high blood pressure. But this way of eating does contradict a lot of things. Oh, and don't forget to eat fat. Don't be afraid of fat. Other side effects: constipation, bad breath, exercise tolerance. I'm going to spend a second on that. If you're used to doing exercise, so I get people that do spinning and running and high interval training and other workouts, and you switch to a keto diet, your exercise is going to be hard initially because your body is used to burning sugar as fuel, and now all of a sudden you don't have that fuel in the tank, and when you go to exercise, it's going to be hard. So my recommendation is scale back on your exercise temporarily. Let your body adjust to burning the fat, and then once you adjust to burning fat, you'll actually find out you have more energy than ever. So it's called becoming fat adapted, and I'll give you some more resources for that later on. The Diet Doctor is where I got a lot of information. I don't know if you can see that here, but dietdoctor.com has an area for low carb side effects. It goes more into bad breath, constipation, and a whole list of other ones. So I don't really have a lot of time in here to go into more details on that. Eating fat. A lot of people say, isn't fat going to raise my cholesterol? Isn't going to make me fat, give me a heart attack? My doctor says I have to eat low fat. We probably got it wrong about fat. There's a lot of conflicting evidence about fat, and there's a lot of evidence that's coming out now about things that were not reported correctly. So there's a lot of industry tweaking of numbers. There's a lot of political gains by avoiding fat. Look up Ansel Keys. He was a physiologist in the 50s and 60s that basically pushed through the science. Science wasn't ready. It wasn't. We didn't really know the answers, but everybody wanted someone to blame for the rising level of heart attacks. So this guy Ansel Keys kind of fudged the numbers on some studies. There's a 7-country study that you might have heard of. There's the Minnesota coronary experiment. These were pushed through as hardcore fact, and we told everybody to eat low fat. We're finding now that not all the numbers were reported, and not everything, not all the data was in, and we're actually finding now that the replacement of, here's a conclusion of this latest study. The replacement of saturated fat in the diet with linoleic acid, that's what you get from the corn oil and canola oil and the other more processed oils. It does lower your serum cholesterol, but it doesn't actually translate to lowering a risk of coronary heart disease. And there's growing evidence that there's been incomplete publication that contributed to the overestimation of benefits of replacing saturated fat with vegetable oils. So, if you think about it, up until about 100 years ago, the only fat we ate was saturated fat, was animal fat. We lived, there was no olive oil, there were no olive trees, and oil was considered a lubricant. So people ate fat. And 100 years ago, there was very little diabetes, very little heart attack. And it was only when we started telling people to stop eating animal fat and stop eating saturated fat that we switched to carbs, and everybody developed heart disease and and all the other things related to insulin resistance. Another thing to be aware of as you're going through this is internet keto. There's a lot of really great information on the internet, but there's a lot of popular fad things on the internet too. So, everyone comes and asks me about this popular Shark Tank keto supplement. And now we're finding that there wasn't really great evidence behind it. This is just a Google search of keto products. Some of them are helpful and some of them are not. You don't have to drink bulletproof coffee and get MCT oil and have ketone supplements. In fact, if you're eating ketone supplements or drinking them or however you ingest them, you're taking in exogenous ketones, you're going to burn them instead of your own. So some people say you might get the benefits of being in ketosis. People get decreased appetite, more mental clarity, more energy. Some people say if you take the ketones through your diet, then you'll feel that and it'll motivate you more to follow a keto diet. But you have to be careful. You have to be aware of that and really do that with caution. So you don't have to do that. You can stick to to real food. So where to get more information? I've mentioned the Diet Doctor again. He's got a whole section on science, and he does a review of the literature on a lot of different science topics, including the saturated fat, and a lot of really great information there. Virta Health is a group that's doing a lot of really great research on treating people with diabetes with a ketogenic diet. They just released 2 years of data showing that the ketogenic diet reverses diabetes, gets people off of insulin, improves fatty liver disease, improves all cardiac markers except for the LDL. So that's another topic, but the LDL cholesterol is a type of cholesterol that a lot of people worry about, and we're finding that that might not be the answer to the story, and there might be a lot of other things behind it. These are some books that are really helpful. The Obesity Code is not exactly keto, but it tells you about the whole carb insulin hypothesis and the basis behind this type of lifestyle. The Big Fat Surprise talks a lot about the fat intake and how we messed up with that. The Vegetarian Myth talks about why being vegetarian might not be helpful and why it's not actually helpful for the environment. And it's written by a woman who was vegan and really wanted to prove to herself that that was the most healthy thing, and she figured out it was not. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be a vegetarian or a vegan and follow this. It's a little more difficult, but there are lots of really great websites that Meat Free Keto is one of them. You do get you have to be careful of getting your protein sources through nuts and seeds and getting your fat, enough fat sources. The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Performance is a great book for athletes to learn about how to get fat adapted. So these are some books. You can screenshot this and take a look at some of these. And then these are some other websites. This is right out of the handout that I give to my patients. Ruled.me is a hardcore keto website that has a keto calculator. You can put in your height and weight and other numbers, and it'll tell you how many carbs you should have. Ditch the Carbs is a great website. Keto Diet app is an actual website as well as an app. Keto Connect has some really great recipes. So you can find lots of really great recipes and meal plans and how-tos. Reversing Type 2 Diabetes is a really great TED Talk, 18-minute TED Talk. Just Google search Reversing Sarah Hallberg TED Talk and it comes right up. Documentaries, I like that Sugar Film and Carb Loaded, and also the Magic Pill. So you can screenshot that and take a look at some of those documentaries, watch them with your family, send them to your doctor. So summary, the ketogenic and low carb diet shows promise and are likely to continue to show health benefits to individuals and in the research. So this is not a fad. In fact, the low fat diet is probably a fad. That's been around much shorter than the low carb diet. It's still not the standard of care, and you might get pushback from your physicians and dietitians and friends and probably everybody. Don't look at this as all or nothing. If you want to just shift away from the carbs and especially the processed carbs and more toward the natural fat and the non-starchy veggies. And people with chronic health conditions such as some neurologic conditions, psychiatric, autoimmune, insulin resistance, severe obesity, might benefit even more from a more strict keto. But again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So I'll end on this cartoon. The doctor tells his patients, you went on Atkins and lost 90 pounds, you lowered your cholesterol and cured your high blood pressure, and now you're walking 5 miles a day. But I'm warning you, low-carb diet's bad for your health. It's going to kill you. So that's what I have. So do we have any questions?
We do. We have a few that are coming in. So,
so I can see them here.
And I will just want to answer so we will be recording this. We will have been recording this. So we're going to send this out to everyone. It'll be on YouTube. So you'll be able to rewatch it. And then we might actually, Dr. Kraze, can we get like maybe the slide?
Yep,
the last 2 slides, and we can send that out in the post-event email as well, so they can have those lists.
Yep.
All right, perfect. So we'll make sure to send all those out to everyone. So I think those are some of our questions. But Harvey Levin did ask, even though you're not counting calories, what do you estimate the average daily caloric intake is?
Well, it's interesting. In the beginning, I tell people not to worry about calories, because if you worry about calories, then you're going to avoid fat. You're going to be afraid of fat because it has more calories. So you eat more fat. In the end, when you follow this and you eat more fat, you end up having about the same amount of calories. So, for an adult male, 1,800 to 2,000 calories. For a woman, 1,500 to 1,800. But I'll tell you, I don't normally do hardcore keto. I do, low carb, higher fat. But for Lent, I decided to do strict keto, and I monitored my ketones and I counted my carbs. I actually ate less calories because I was more satisfied, and there wasn't a lot to eat. Once you ate the fat and the vegetables, you're like, okay, I feel pretty good. So in the beginning, you might have more. You might go to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. I mean, literally, I think I probably had 4,000 calories one day, but your body starts to adjust and you dial it back. Those were the slides. I'm going to go back to the other set while I'm answering the other questions. Grams of protein per day. That's a tough one because it really depends on the individual and how athletic they are and how much they weigh. In general, it's 0.8 to 1 grams per kilogram per day. So you've got to put your weight, figure it out in kilograms. So for the average person that weighs 160 pounds, that's about 80 grams of carbs per day. Okay, diet soda. So hardcore people say you can't have diet soda. I'm not hardcore. What I said about the non-nutritive sweeteners like NutraSweet, Stevia, Splenda, and that, they're in Diet Coke and diet things. If you can have it and it satisfies a craving and it doesn't trigger you to have more, then use it as a tool. But if having it makes you hungry and makes you want to snack more, then stay away from it. So, some of the hardcore keto people will say that they stimulate your appetite and increase your insulin level. I think if you're doing okay and you can use it as a tool, then that's okay. Somebody's asking, how do you get past the carb addiction? Everyone in the office has been trying to eliminate carbs, and then there's a fresh box of pretzels. You got to get them out. I know it's hard. I know people bring them in, and some people don't have control over what people bring into the office. I'm happy to throw them away. I say, what's more wasteful? Wasting them in the waste can or wasting them on my waist? But again, having the fat available. So if you have some cheese, some cream, I'm even hesitant to tell people to eat more fat because I just reading a book, and this guy talks about how he'll have a slice of cheese and he'll roll butter into the cheese, and he'll have that when he has a carb craving and it knocks it out. Some people can have more fat than others. But it's really hard in the beginning. Carb is an addiction, and sometimes it takes some external, you can't count on willpower. You have to get it out of the way. You've got to you have to make commitments, do something for Lent, or now it's Ramadan when you're fasting, stay away from things, find some ways to make some commitments, but it is very hard. And there's another question about sugar addiction. And they have found that, you know, when they look at functional MRIs, the brain lights up when people eat sugar. Rats will behave the same way about sugar as they do when they get addicted to heroin. It is very hard. But I have patients that have been self-proclaimed carb addicts. They tell me there's no way I can do this. I'm not going to do it. And they come back the next time, and they're the ones that do the best. They're like, I stopped my juice. I stopped my soda. I said I'm not going to have it, and I'm doing great. So, you know, it's all individual. Don't, you know, go by yourself. Go by what you can do, and don't use, oh, I read about carb addiction, so I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. Intermittent fasting. Somebody's asking about combining keto with intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is a natural progression of the keto diet. Once you start doing, and again, my disclaimer, when I say keto diet, I mean low carb, high fat. You might not be hardcore keto. You might not be doing the full keto, but the low carb lifestyle, you're less hungry. And so people say, you know, I'm not hungry, but I feel like I should have breakfast, so I force myself. Don't force yourself to eat. You can have 2 meals a day. And then the next extension of that is intermittent fasting, where you go even longer without eating. So there are a lot of different methods to do this. The most popular type of intermittent fasting is called 16-8, where everything you eat is in an 8-hour window, and then you don't eat for 16 hours. So for example, you might eat between 12 noon and 8 p.m., and then you don't eat from 8 p.m. until noon the next day. Now you can drink water, and if you have to have something, like if you have to drink your coffee or you have to take medications, you want to have something that doesn't spike your insulin. The theory behind the intermittent fasting is trying to let your body go longer with your insulin level dropped so that you can burn fat. So if you have something that doesn't stimulate insulin, like fat, so cream in your coffee, then that's considered okay with intermittent fasting if you're doing it for dietary weight loss purposes. There's another type of intermittent fasting for cancer that's a little bit more hardcore and strenuous. But if you go to the Diet Doctor website and you look for intermittent fasting, there are a lot of really good articles on it. There's a question here about constipation. You know, I mentioned that and I didn't go into details because it is really tough. Drink a lot of water. Sometimes you need more salt. You can look, you know, chia seeds, flax seeds, fiber, Metamucil, magnesium supplements. If you go to dietdoctor.com and you look up constipation, he goes into that some more. Some people do have to use some stronger products like Miralax or milk of magnesia. Not everybody gets this, and it does get better over time. And sometimes you do have to bring a little carbs back or have more, you know, veggies or a little more fruit if you really can't get out of it. Here's a question on weight loss surgery and weight regain. I have a lot of patients that have had weight loss surgery and now are getting weight regain, and they do great on the keto diet. And, you know, I know that your surgical program is probably recommending to stick to 1,200 calories. Again, I say don't count the calories. Look at the fat and look at being satisfied. And you might have a little more calories, but you'll find you're actually losing weight. It's getting those carbs out. So I think the keto diet is absolutely fine and healthy for people that have had weight loss surgery. If you're newly had surgery, make sure you get enough protein in. That's your number one thing, is getting the protein. But long term, it's actually very safe. Honey and maple syrup are sugar. They turn into fructose, and your body looks at them just like sugar. So somebody asked about honey and maple syrup. Honey, maple syrup, agave, sugar in the raw, brown sugar, it's all sugar. Somebody says, you mentioned Fat Bomb as a snack. Can you provide an example of a quick high-fat snack? Wait, these keep moving, I lost it. To satisfy cravings. Cheese, olives, avocado, eggs, pepperoni. There's questions about pepperoni and the processed meats. I recommend getting uncured, so they don't have nitrates, so that's less of a risk, slightly less risk of cancer. People say that there's a higher risk of cancer with processed meat. Somebody asks about peanut butter. Peanut butter is fine if there's no sugar added. Now, if you look at the label and it says all natural, well, guess what? Sugar is natural, so that's not good enough. You've got to read the label and make sure there's no sugar added. And again, be careful. Too much of it has a lot of carbs. Somebody asked about desserts besides berries and cream. These questions are coming in rapid fire, so tell me when I need to stop.
Yeah, I'm trying to like dismiss the ones that you've been answering, so that's why they've been kind of disappearing a little bit, because we do have a lot. Okay. Everyone, again, you might want to save some of the more specific questions for your physician. We want to keep it a little bit more general for everyone, and I would say we're going to go till about maybe 8:40, 8:45, and then call it an evening. So if you want to take a look at some of the questions that have come in and, you know, choose some to answer, everyone else, we'll have track of these questions, and we can try to answer them afterwards. But if you want to just choose a few that are a little bit more general versus specific, and then we can finish up around 8:45.
Okay. So I see a few questions about leg cramps with people that have already been doing this, and people already trying the potassium and magnesium, you know, drinking water. You know, if you're still having cramps after adding potassium, magnesium, a multivitamin, drinking a lot of water, then you should probably talk to your doctor to see if there's something else maybe going on. But maybe you need more salt and more water too. Somebody's asking if dairy is considered carbs and should be cut out. It depends by what you mean by dairy. Heavy cream, cheese, butter, they are no or very, very low carbs. Milk, you have to be very careful. Count the carbs on that. Take a look at the label and, you know, be careful with the milk. Yogurt, I don't know if anyone asked about yogurt. That's often a common question. Yogurt is full of sugar. Chobani vanilla yogurt has more sugar than Breyer's vanilla ice cream. And most yogurt are low fat. So if you really want to have yogurt, you need to get full fat yogurt that is plain, not flavored, and add your own sweetener or berries. Somebody's asking about alcohol. Be careful with alcohol in the beginning, because you actually become much more sensitive to alcohol. So alcohol can be more potent. It can feel stronger. But wine has very little. Wine and champagne have very little carbs, and spirits like, you know, vodka, whiskey, gin, really don't have any carbs. They have calories, and they also prompt you to overeat because it's hard to drink without eating. So, you know, alcohol is okay, but just be very careful, you know, with it, but you don't have to give it up completely. Somebody asked about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or NASH, and could this diet used to treat it? Absolutely. Do not listen to anybody that tells you to go on a low-carb diet to treat your fatty liver. The Virta Health, I mentioned before, just came out with their 2-year data that fatty liver improves significantly with the low-fat diet. Fatty liver is caused by insulin resistance, which is caused by eating too many carbs. So this is a great diet for fatty liver, and we're going to see more and more research behind that. And I have patients myself who have reversed their fatty liver. You know, if it hasn't gone too far to cirrhosis, they reversed their fatty liver, and their numbers have gotten really much better. Somebody's asking about this large-scale studies on low-carb diets and mortality, and can they promote the higher risk of death? And is this a function of overly low carbs or of eating too much red meat? You know what? You can poke holes in any dietary study. The studies that look at the increased cause of death don't take into effect a lot of other things. Like those people that were eating high-fat meats, but they were also eating, you know, buns and fries with that high-fat meat in terms of hamburgers and French fries. They didn't take into account other things. And actually, a lot of those studies were not very low carb. They were actually fairly moderate carb, like 30% carb. And they relied on dietary recall. A lot of nutritional research relies on dietary recall. Right now, I want you to tell me what you had to eat last week. How many eggs did you have? what did you have for breakfast 2 weeks ago? That's how these diet studies were done. If you can tell me what you ate, one of these studies that they looked at 25 years, what you were eating 25 years ago, and then put that into the research and said, okay, people that were eating more eggs 25 years ago, how do you know how many eggs you were eating 25 years ago? And maybe you don't want to admit it, or maybe in your mind you don't even think you ate that much. So, like I said before, nutrition is like religion and politics. There's going to be research behind every approach, and you're going to be able to back it up with studies, and you're going to be able to poke holes in everybody's study. My answer to that in the end is, at the very least, the keto diet is probably just as good as, or better, as the low-calorie diet, as the low-fat diet, and it deserves to be recognized and tried because we know how the low-fat, low-calorie diet has been working. It hasn't been for a lot of people. So, and we're finding more and more that it's becoming accepted. The American Diabetes Association is actually finally acknowledging that low-carb and keto can be helpful for diabetes. So it's slow, but it's going to take some time. That was a long-winded answer, diatribe. What else? Paleo as a middle ground. Paleo is okay. There's more. There's no dairy. There's more fruit. There's also low carb paleo. I think in the end, the biggest thing is cutting out the processed carbs and trying to stay lower carb. So the biggest difference in the paleo and the keto is the amount of fruit. You can try it and see what works for you. I find paleo to be a little too lenient in some areas and not enough in others. Somebody asked for a reasonable limit for meal portions, i.e. filet mignon and wine consumption. In the beginning, you might go crazy. Like, wow, I can eat all the meat I want. I'm going to, eat like crazy. But after a while, you'll become, try to listen to your body. You'll become more satisfied. Maybe don't have the whole piece of meat on your plate. Cut half of it and save it for later. And if you're still hungry, eat it. But if you're not, save it for later. You get to have it for breakfast. Can you take probiotics? Yes. Carnivore. Somebody asked about the carnivore diet. There are some big proponents of the carnivore diet. I think it's Georgia Eade has a lot of information. She's a psychiatrist that follows. I don't want to misspeak, but I think she's one. People say that carnivore diet is probably in line with how we used to eat, and it can be very healthy, and people do well on it. Obviously there's not a lot of great research behind it, but I don't discount it for some people. Desserts besides berries and cream. There are lots of them. Google keto dessert. There's, I'm drawing a blank now. Dark chocolate. I make a dark chocolate mousse. I do half 60% chocolate and half Lily's low carb chocolate chips, and I mix heavy cream, and it ends up being like 8 or 10 grams of carbs for a half a cup, and it's very satisfying. There are fat bombs that have peanut butter and cream cheese, and you can make put lime and make lime and cheese and cream and make like key lime mousse cake. But you do want to be careful that you're not replacing one, sweet craving with another, because you can go overboard. But there are some desserts out there that are reasonable.
I was just going to say, you just made me hungry, and I just want to give the warning. We're at 8:41, so if you want to give any, last-minute thoughts, wrap it up, and then what we can do is we'll have the questions that we didn't get to, and again, everyone, we will send out the recording to everyone, and it'll also be posted on our YouTube channel for everyone to watch at their leisure and share with anyone and reach out. But any final thoughts for us this evening?
Just looking at a couple more. One is asking me how to explain losing fat when you're consuming more fat. And that kind of goes back to not all calories are the same, and the calories you eat have a very different effect on your hormones. So fat actually makes you burn fat. Carbs make you store fat. somebody's asking about the plant-based initiative. That's a funny thing. People that follow plant-based, really hardcore about following plant-based diets and are very disciplined about it and don't say they're vegetarian but eat a lot of pasta, they also reduce their risk of heart disease and do pretty well. I just find that much harder to follow than the keto diet. We don't know. Certain people respond differently. I think we are designed differently. There are civilizations that lived on whale blubber and meat. If you lived in this country, in this climate, you ate meat and you only had vegetables and fruit in season, and that was it. But there are people in more tropical climates that ate more plants and vegetables and didn't have meat, and they also did well. So, we don't know really about, the hardcore plant-based versus the hardcore keto. People can do well with both. It seems to be the in-between that people get in trouble. So again, my last thought is, nutrition is like religion and politics. Everybody's going to have their set ways. What's not worked for you before. Maybe trying something new, not being too afraid of it, getting the facts behind it, doing some good reading may be helpful. So a lot of information to put in an hour. Hope I answered a lot of good questions.
Thank you so much, and I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Again, it will be on the YouTube. Someone did ask. It's Thomas Jefferson University Alumni, but as I said, we will send out the recording to everyone to the email you used to register for this evening. We're always looking for different ideas. We span all different types of topics, so if you have any ideas, you can always reach us at alumni@jefferson.edu. Take a look at our calendar, meet us in person at some of the events that are upcoming. But I want to thank you all for joining us. I think it was a great Tuesday night. I now want to try to make some dark chocolate keto mousse. And thank you again.
Thank you. This was great.
Wonderful. Have a good night, everyone.